Hello. I worked with a lot of you already and you know what this is about, but also some people I haven't met. So my name is Chloe. I work at Pacific Science Center in the Tinker Tank department. So we make a lot of engineering, hands-on activities that inspire people to make things. And one project that I've been getting involved in at PacSci is called ARISS, which is Amateur Radio on the International Space Station. So the ISS has an amateur radio station on board, and their astronauts are able to be scheduled to talk to people, educational organizations on the ground. So you write a proposal explaining why your educational organization is interested in this. It could be a school, it could be a science center, it could be a museum or a camp or whatnot. You explain what activities and curriculum that you're going to be doing leading up that relate to amateur radio, space weather, satellite communications, anything that you can pull in. And if they like your educational plan, they'll sponsor you and schedule you to talk to these astronauts. Now you're welcome to talk through the repeater on the ISS at any time. It works better if it's actually passing over you. But because the astronauts are very busy, they're probably not going to respond. So having this access to those crew members is really valuable. So you select a group of students that you want to benefit from this. So we've selected our youth development cohort on site called Discovery Corps. And they're a group of high school teenagers. They're learning professional skills by holding positions at the Science Center. They're paid positions. They're learning different educational curriculums related to science. So they've developed a curriculum for ARISS. They're going to be learning things like space weather, like I mentioned, and satellite communications, heliocentric physics, all sorts of space concepts. And while they're learning all that curriculum, they'll come visit my shop, which is Tinker Tank, and we're going to teach them how to build amateur radio things. So we'll teach them how to build a tape measure antenna. We're going to teach them how to solder leading up to that. They're going to solder their own attenuator kit and take their tape measure antenna that they built, use their attenuator kit that they also built, and they're going to go around the Science Center and see if they can find a Foxhunt transmitter. So as they keep progressing in amateur radio, maybe one of them or a few of them might want to get their license, which we would then encourage them to study, of course, and to other resources like the amateur radio clubs here today, and see if that's something that they'd want to go down. And then we're going to have a grand big event, which I think it would be super awesome if anybody in the amateur radio field would join. It's going to be in the style of science in a movie. So what that looks like at the Science Center is we have people in any sort of scientific field, in this case amateur radio, satellite communications, space weather and whatnot, talk about their work and inspire young people who might not know what they want to do in their future to pursue a career in those paths or education in those paths, or just be a hobbyist in those paths. And then the whole crowd that's there that is learning from these professionals gets to watch the teen students make contact and talk to ISS crew members. So they get to hear them speaking into the radio, they get to see adjusting the radio, and they also get to hear the ISS crew members' responses back. So it's going to be really exciting and probably very intimidating for these teams. So we're trying to support them as much as possible and make this all seem very normal for them to be talking in front of a lot of people in a big IMAX theater lecture space. And some of the cool things that you might be able to see on that day, we actually have a handout here if you'd like to grab one of those. It's going to show you things like our station design. So we specifically selected some equipment. Namely, we selected an ICOM 9700 as the radio we'll be using because ICOM is a local business, and we would be happy to foster that connection with the community. We have a few other items selected that are very useful. We describe the antenna that we'll be using. So we're going to attempt to build a circularly polarized helix antenna and get that up and running. And if that does not meet by the due date, then we're going to go with a commercially produced Yagi antenna. We're going to both have the 2 meter and the 70 centimeter, and all of this is also going to be on that handout. And then other things like the rotor control and whatnot. That antenna will be installed on the roof of the theater, the IMAX theater, so that's why we're going to need a lot of those mechanical equipment pieces like the rotor control rather than going up to the roof every time we need to adjust the antenna ourselves. So that'll be super helpful. Also on the next page of that handout, it's going to show what our screen is going to look like. So we would like to show the people that are attending this event as much information as possible and get them as involved in this process as it happens real time. We don't want you to just watch the teens. We also want you to see what that antenna looks like on the roof as it's moving. We want you to see what the ISS's view is over Earth. So we're going to get that cam up passing over its orbit. We're also going to have the orbit path so you know exactly where the location is and why we've selected to move the antenna at the times that we have. We're also going to have some sponsorship logos on there for all the wonderful people that have supported us through this process. And a couple of other videos. I believe we'll have a video of the actual radio screen as well. The other pictures in that handout there, those are going to be a lot of technical aspects that we had to problem solve, which was a very, very, very large aspect of this project so far. Starting this project, I had absolutely no knowledge about amateur radio at all. I saw a video on Instagram that showed somebody holding an antenna, and I thought it looked interesting, so I read the caption, and it talked all about ARISS and how you do not have to have experience, but you can contact the ISS, and that was good enough for me in the Science Center. So we deep dived in. We tried to make ISS contacts ourselves with the help of West Seattle Amateur Radio Club, and almost failed because we forgot an adapter or thought that we did, but then we didn't, and it was successful. So it is a big, big learning process. Everybody has been extremely supportive as I got my amateur radio license. So my call sign is November 1 Bravo Delta X-ray. And yeah, it's very valuable. We're extremely excited to not only make this event successful, but to see what the success of it brings in terms of interest and learning for future amateur radio activities. So the point of me being here today is not only to just introduce you to this one project we've been working on, but hear what kinds of ideas you have for future amateur radio programming at Pacific Science Center, different community groups or youth groups that you think may benefit from viewing an experience like this or being part of an experience like this, or what you hope to see in the future, even if you're just a visitor. So I don't have too much left to say. I definitely like to engage with everybody's thoughts. So first, has anybody here been to Pacific Science Center before? Or do you want to share a positive experience you had there or something that you wished you saw there?
I'll start.
All right.
I had a lot of students attend the Pacific Science Center.
That's awesome.
They would often talk about all the things that they were learning and doing, and I was very impressed. I'm retired now, but I thought it was wonderful that there was a place where they could learn and explore and gain all different kinds of scientific knowledge. There's not a lot of students that I know of across the country that have access to that, so it's cool.
That is true. That's one of our driving principles, is getting as many people access as possible. So that's awesome. Thank you. Anybody else have thoughts or questions?
I apologize that I missed your beginning of your presentation.
That's okay.
Could you tell me your role at the Pacific Science Center and because the radio part was kind of neat.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when the girls were younger, it was fun to explore the science center, but I've never was exposed to the radio.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a makerspace facilitator at the Science Center, part of the Maker and Innovation Lab. Right now we're doing a lot of hands-on engineering activities, and we're about to expand our space to become a full makerspace available for the public, to really encourage dangerous tool usage and making, creating, innovation, and we teach this through design cycle thinking. My background at the Science Center, I was actually in the education department before, so I taught a lot of the live science stage shows, planetarium shows, and one of my focuses was space physics, astrophysics, and specifically spectroscopy with all the electromagnetic spectrum. So when I stumbled upon the ARISS video on Instagram, it just a light bulb went off of, I know that I'm into this stuff. I know that we can do something cool. So it's very much new for PacSci. I do know a couple other science centers and museums have amateur radio stations. Arizona Science Center has one currently, and they've also been selected for an ARISS contact. So we could very much set something up similar to theirs or try to go our own route, which I think we would be focusing more on satellite communications and tying in the space knowledge, since that's a big topic for us.
And then to add to that, your educational background, where did you study? From high school, you went to?
Great question. So yeah, I went to high school and I was not interested in science or anything at all. I really wasn't sure if I was going to go to college, but I randomly decided to graduate early and go for special education teaching. So I stayed pretty local in the state of Nevada where I grew up for college, got my degree, and as soon as I graduated with that degree, I came to Washington to start teaching in Bellevue. So I taught special education in a middle school, and that was a really tough experience, and I got burnt out very quickly. So I knew I needed to do something temporarily. I went back to work at the Science Center, which was just a summer job for me, but I started to see, since they reopened from COVID, they were now at a spot that they wanted to build. They didn't want to just survive after COVID. They wanted to keep expanding with their programming. So that was a really awesome opportunity that lined up for me.
Thank you.
Yes.
Of the teenagers that you're working with on this project,
Mm-hmm.
how many of them said they want to get their license? Is that motivating?
They don't know too much yet about the project. So much of this has been background work so far, but they are just starting their curriculum this week, and I don't know if they know yet that it's an option to get their license by the end of it, but they are extremely excited, and just with the teens I've worked with so far, I can definitely see at least 30 or 40% of them getting their license, and there's going to be 18 of them total. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you're working, for this project, you're working mostly with high school students, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you also thinking about younger kids and how to include them in this?
Absolutely. Yeah. So PacSci is not a children's museum, but we do a really great job at marketing towards children. And so the biggest piece of this conversation has been, how can we make sure anything we provide is accessible to younger age children, even if we are not a children's museum. And so part of that, we're pulling in our camps department. So our camps department has a ton of space related camps. They might develop more specific emergency skills camps in the future. But right now, their space camps are for elementary school kids. So those kids will go through their space curriculum the week of our event, of our ARISS event, and by the end of it, they're going to be shadowing the DC teens that we'll be working with individually. And once the DC teens feel comfortable with their own knowledge and competence, then they can relay some of that in different types of activities like Wi-Fi detecting with different materials for those younger age kids, and then those camper kids will be invited to the event too. We also hope to do all of this programming for the public once we do it successfully in-house. So thank you. Yes.
So next year, you're going to come back and give another talk. What are you going to talk to us about what the Science Center do with Camp Radio next year?
My hope is to be talking about CubeSats. NASA is really great at sponsoring educational organizations to do so many cool things, and one of those is to build nano satellites and have them launched into space. And those nano satellites do have amateur radio capabilities. So the goal is to apply to write a proposal for that program as well, see if we can build a CubeSat on site, pull in more community organizations that have already built one. I know that the UW Husky Lab has, so see if we can get some guidance from there, and create a permanent exhibit, pulling all of these elements together and show that amateur radio doesn't just have to stay on the ground, which it's great when it does too, but also we can expand with it as society grows. Yes.
And what would one of those satellites do once it's up there? What's the point of it?
That's a great question. I'm not entirely sure about the satellites within that program. I do know that any educational organization that's selected for an ARISS contact actually operates as a backup station in case the amateur radio station on the ISS goes down. So I assume it's some sort of backup communication system. We could potentially consider making it a geostationary satellite because that's not very popular or common. So just trying to put a name out in space. Yeah.
So back to your background qualification. So since you weren't interested in science too much, when you got back to school and college, were you focused a lot on math? And I mean, what subjects kind of brought
Sure.
you around?
So I took a lot of those, all of the prerequisites that are required, and I selected a lot of science classes out of that because I thought if I was ever going to have an opportunity to study science, it would be then. And I was very interested in it, so I really just started reading a lot of books about astrophysics and cosmos and whatnot, and watching a lot of TV shows about Neil deGrasse Tyson. And so just actually enjoying that and it not feeling like work when I was doing that made me understand that I can enjoy working in that field. So when I would take all of that knowledge I learned from reading and bring it back to the Science Center when I was working there for the summer, I would embed it into my planetarium shows. And I would just hang out on the floor. We've got something called Science on a Sphere. It's this big floating sphere and it has live NOAA data sets on it. And so we can talk about how things are changing around the Earth. We can show different planets on SOS. And so I would just bring that knowledge to those conversations. And when guests would engage with that, and I realized how many people are interested in it but don't necessarily know where to start, I could very easily say, I didn't either. And I just did this because it's cool. So bring whatever you have to the table. And that made connecting with people a lot easier.
What book would you recommend for someone who's not normally interested and you want to get them?
That is a really great question. I don't know. Definitely, there's one book that sticks out to me a lot, and I'm not even sure if I remember the name. It has nothing to do with space or amateur radio or satellites at all. It has to do with the nervous system. And I'll have to find the name of it, but it was incredibly dense and I thought I couldn't read it, but it was still able to tell a story through it. So I felt proud of myself for being able to read that and appreciate it. I think there was a question over here.
What's been the hardest part of this process so far?
Honestly, believing in myself. With somebody with no formal background, a lot of days I think that people should be saying no to me and then they'll say yes to me and say that I can do something really cool. And I'm like, oh, now I have to make it happen. So just reminding myself that this is how you start getting into fields and how you start progressing and learning is by doing it when it's hard, and then you'll start to understand the concepts more. So I hope that students can feel the same way, because that's exactly why I didn't study science, is because it was hard at first and I didn't think I could.
How was getting your license?
Funny. At first, I wanted to take a really deep dive into it and take a class and go through the whole book and extend the process and make sure I knew exactly what I was talking about. But with the deadline of writing the proposal for ARISS, that was just not a possibility. So instead, I crammed the entire thing. I only used the study app on my phone, and every day for a week, I spent hours on it, and then I just took the test. And if I failed, I knew why, because I didn't do it the best way possible, but I ended up passing. So it was a relief. It was just another thing to add in to the chaos, but it was good.
Suppose you were a first grader about to go into second grade. What advice would you have? Like, what opportunities do you want to be interested to do? What do you wish that you had studied more in school, or you suggest
Great question. I would definitely recommend asking questions. I know that there's a get on the air net. If you don't have to do all the hard work yourself, don't. If somebody's going to let you use their radio, take that opportunity. If somebody's going to tell you exactly what to say as you're talking on the radio and you don't have to remember all of the letters in your head, make it as fun and easy as possible. And then when you learn the hard stuff later, you'll get why you were doing the things you're doing.
You mentioned the Youth on the Airnet. What's that?
Yeah, so the Youth on the Airnet is on Thursday nights at, I believe, 7 p.m. And the goal is to get youth on the air. They don't have to be licensed. They can be interested in getting their license, but they're provided radios by, is it the Mountaineers group or just Scouts? By West Seattle Amateur Radio Club. And it's to start bridging a connection between the community that exists within amateur radio today and how to keep passing that on.
Does that happen in a particular physical space? Like you have to go and show up, right, to get to the radio?
Nope, you can do it from home if you have the radio with you. And they also help you get your license and call sign, so that's when you can do it independently.
But like if you don't know what you're doing,
Oh, I see.
like you have to go get the radio from somebody, right?
Right.
How do you know how to operate it?
That's a great question. Is it part of Scouts? I believe it
So,
might be.
What several of us in the West Seattle Amateur Radio Club do is teach the radio merit badge to Scouts, and then the ones that have an aptitude or an interest, we help them get their license. We do about 2 classes a year, and all it is just basically just going through the hand study app and just making sure they're drilling themselves through the app. It's really simple. It gamifies it for a lot of kids to play with the questions and ask the ones that get wrong all the time. And then every kid that gets their license, we offer them a Alpha radio. We pre-program it with 5 different channels on it. They're West Seattle, WSARC, Columbia Tower repeater, and we use the Columbia Tower repeater. And it's been kind of interesting. One time the repeater was linked, so we had people coming in from Texas and San Diego for 2 years. I couldn't figure out how that was happening. But it was linked from a previous net. We've had a girl as young as 5.5 join. It was Adelaide. She used her dad's call sign to get on the air, but it's just kind of random. Try and get these young voices to feel like they've got a place they can get on the air, say hi, and share what they're doing. It's only happened 7 times so far. Just got approval from NCS to do that. So it's 7 o'clock on 444.55 on Thursday nights. It's probably going to be dormant over the summer, but it's just a great opportunity to try and get these voices out, because the goal of this ARISS contact that Chloe's doing is to not have people like us run the radios, have people like her run the radios.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric.
Jim, is the Ham Jam a place that someone that's not licensed could come and be with you to get on the air?
Yeah, every first Monday of the month, West Seattle Amateur Radio Club has what they call a Ham Jam at West Seattle Achievement Center, and people can come in who are just recently licensed and say, I don't know how to program my radio, and I'll sit there and program it for them, or have seniors or anyone else who wants to come in and just ask questions about it, and I will try and talk through the hobby and give indications of how best to try and get your license, because it is such a huge hobby, and sometimes it's very intimidating. So get the license and then study what you want to do. I encourage that all the time. But anyone is welcome for that. And first Monday of the month at open door 5:45, and it runs concurrent with the net check-in to West Seattle. So from 6:15 to 7 o'clock, we have the West Seattle Amateur Radio Club Monday night net. So there's a chance for people to check in, even with a control operator, that they just want to be the one to push the button.
That's awesome. Great opportunity. I think I saw there was a question in the back a bit ago.
Where did you get the antenna? Did you build it, or?
Oh, great question. So this antenna is actually Eric's, but Pacific Science Center has purchased their own. It's an arrow shaft antenna. So These purple things, those are arrow shafts, and it's a Yagi antenna. So you can, I think the website is something like arrowantennas.com, so you purchase that.
So, explain the rest of that station and what you can do with it.
I'll grab a handout so I can point to the things I'm talking about. All right, so I mentioned a bit ago that we selected the ICOM 9700 as the radio, so that is a big part of it, that's for sure. That's how we're going to be able to go to the right frequency so that we can speak to the ISS crew members, adjust the frequency as it comes back so we can hear it, make sure we're doing that all in due time so you can also hear it on the speakers in the theater, and also for I don't think we have to worry about what's it called? I'm blanking. When you have to adjust as it's passing over. Doppler effect, thank you. I think we don't have to worry too much about it, but we want to factor that in at least as we have to go down as it passes over. Connected to that, we can start at the bottom with the green line. All of this is going to be elements in the theater run by our theater's director, Jen. So we're going to be displaying all the different projectors onto the big screen, making sure you can hear it in the IMAX speakers, so it's a really awesome experience. And then moving up from there, we've got the Yagi antennas on the roof. So those will be up on the top of our tallest building, and that's pretty hard to see from the ground. You won't be able to experience that, so that's why we're going to take a video of that actually moving. What's going to be actually physically moving them is going to be that rotor in between them connected to the rotor control, which is connected to the sat tracker. So basically this system of moving the antennas, we were going to do it in a much more complicated way until the sat tracker, which does it for us. It detects things for us and it sends those back up to the rotor control and moves those antennas. So we don't have to do the physical labor of moving it or making sure we're typing in the computer. So because of that sat tracker, we don't even entirely need that primary station computer anymore since we won't be the one controlling the rotor control anymore. Good to have as backup, but it's going to be doing a lot of the heavy work for us so that all we can focus on is making sure the teens are getting the best experience as possible, making sure that everything is running as smoothly as possible. And luckily, we had actually the director of ARISS operations take a look at this and recommend that sat tracker and make sure it goes easy. And then next to that, we've got, so that's going to be the primary station. That's all we hope to use. But of course, you have to have a backup station because ARISS really wants to ensure that things are successful. So they have that in the plans already, is you have to have that backup station so that things work out for you. So that backup station is going to be from West Seattle Amateur Radio Club, who's been involved in this process since the very beginning. In part of the ARISS proposal, you have to work with a radio club, so that's who we reached out to. And they've been extremely helpful, extremely generous with their time and resources, so we're extremely grateful for that. So that's what that station's going to look like. It's a little bit smaller with just the single antenna, the 2 meter. We've got the preamp, and then, of course, the radio as well. This one will be containing the computer, as we don't have the sat tracker doing all the work for us. Are there any questions about the station? Yes.
How much of this equipment do you already have?
So we have a lot of the handheld things so far. We are working with ICOM to actually donate a radio to us for this and for potentially a future permanent station. But that takes contracting because it's a nonprofit and gifting and whatnot. So everything is on the way right now. We hope to have it by the end of June, if not early July, so that we can start setting everything up, have it built, do practice runs by mid to end July. And then the ARISS contact is going to be happening the week of August 12th.
And those practice runs, are those going to be things that you're doing privately, or are they going to be public?
They're going to start private first with just staff. Once we do 1 or 2 of those successfully, we'll invite the DC teams who've been working on this. Once we do that successfully and maybe see if they can control some aspect of it, or potentially talk through the repeater using our call signs, then we could invite the campers to come view as well. And because the scheduling of ARISS is, you have to be extremely flexible, all we know is the week of August 12th. And they were very kind to schedule us within that week and give us this much notice. But we'll only find out when the day is 1 week in advance. So that's kind of hard to plan in terms of marketing and getting people excited to come to the event when they don't know when the event is. So that's when we'll start probably opening up some of those practice runs to the public and say, if you're interested, we actually have a really cool, much better event coming up August 12th. Maybe, hopefully you can attend. So we'll try to get the public in as much as possible. Yes.
Is this going to be a continual event in future years?
Potentially.
The idea would,
I've heard of organizations getting multiple ARISS contacts, but you have to go through the proposal writing process every time that you want to do it. So we could absolutely go for it again, and I wonder if they would even let us do some of the same curriculum or programming. But we would like to make it as hands-off as possible, and if we could have a permanent station, maybe we only turn on the receiving aspect of it so that you can just tune through and hear people talking through the different satellites. I would be interested in having this event again, but the goal is to get as many ideas from people as possible so we can make their ideas come to life. Great question. Yes?
What is space weather?
I'm actually not too informed on this topic. I think a lot of it is related to heliocentric physics, and this year is actually the heliocentric big year. So lots of solar events, solar flares, coronal mass ejections, interrupting a lot of the frequencies, and that's why Aurora Borealis was so present not too long ago. So I think it's a lot in relation to that, storms and whatnot on planets that are affecting the electromagnetic grid. But if anybody wants to share information about that, I'd be happy to hear it.
How can the public experience some of what you're doing at the Tinker Tank, just even outside of Greenville?
That is a great question. Come on by. We're open 5 days a week during the school year, 7 days a week during the summer and breaks. And Tinker Tank is open for the entirety of our open hours. On our floor, we've got a whole bunch of unfacilitated activities with different natures. We've got rigmajig, Lego building. We've got different pods and activities that we come up with and switch out every month or so with different tool usage and making inspiration. And then we also have some more facilitated activities. We host things called Innovation Station. It's like a drop-in period, and we can host things like using our sewing machines, using soldering, wood-burning tools, more dangerous tool usage that you have to sign a waiver for. But we really just try to explore as many things as possible. So if you have ideas of what you want to see, we're happy to hear it. If you come by and ask how you can expand on an activity, make it more difficult, or relate it to something else, ask. We're also happy to do that too.
What is the age of a child who the youngest age that could benefit from the Tinker Tank?
For our unfacilitated activities, it's all ages. We see toddlers interacting. One of our big activities right now is called Camp Cardboard. So we're encouraging cardboard construction related to camping. So we built a big tent, and then the tent started to fall apart as kids destroyed it, of course. So then we encourage kids to rebuild the tent. And we give them make-do screws. So it's like 3D printed and plastic screws and brackets and screwdrivers. So that's the focus of some of our activities. We're very safe, hands-on. And then if you move to some of our other activities, we typically encourage about 8 years and up if we're doing things with waivers and whatnot. Of course.
How would someone, if they wanted to talk to a satellite, obviously you had to put a huge grant together, but you mentioned a repeater on the ISS. What do you need to do to talk to that?
Great question. You don't need to write that whole proposal, which takes a lot of time. You can do it with a handheld radio. So we've actually used this specific Yagi antenna to talk through the repeater on the ISS and a handheld. We did it at the Science Center. We did build a tape measure antenna beforehand, which would not, I don't know if it would work nearly as well, but it's possible. But we just looked at its path, moved the antenna with our hand, looked at it, adjusted, turned the squelch off, and it was very successful. We could hear them pretty clearly, logged the call sign, and then I received a really cool postcard from the ISS.
And if anybody's interested in, I think there's in about 40 minutes, there's a satellite pass that should be actually very good here at this site. So if you're interested in that, there's a listing of all the satellite passes for the weekend on the SeattleRadioFieldDay.org website, and it just lists all of the satellite passes.
Is that the same as an ISS pass, or what's a satellite pass?
Yeah, it's not. There are ISS passes this weekend. This particular one that should be quite good is not an ISS pass. It's Tetzel 8. I'm not
cool, though.
familiar with that particular satellite, but they almost certainly have an energy radio repeater on it, and if you tune into their frequency, you'll be able to hear from adjacent states and certain speaking.
Absolutely. I think we heard as far north as Canada, and down to, do you remember as far south? Arizona. That's what I was thinking.
So it's basically just a similar experience of something is flying overhead and you're talking to.
Yes, exactly, and it's just scattered. Yes.
And I think to clarify, but when we talk satellite, the Altalog is, sorry, the Arrow antenna is my favorite. I have an Altalog. The Arrow's lighter point, but the way to think of it is the higher it is above you, the easier it is to talk to. So we got to look at the orbital inclination.
Yes.
Orbits don't go around the equator generally, and spy satellites go north-south. So his talked about look up the satellites, and you can find you can talk to many of them, and they're a lot more than the space station. It's not about space station. There are many, and the space station will do things like trying to slow scan pictures, sending a whole variety of activity. And listening, I've used a Kenwood 72. It's full duplex, so if you put headphones on, you can even hear your own signal coming back, repeated back to you. So there are a lot of ways to play with it, even though they're short contact. It's friendly. You talk to people on the other side of the United States using the space station as a relay.
That's awesome. Thank you. And that's actually a really good point that you brought up about the higher the higher that the orbit is, the easier it is. We're trying to get a general idea of what specific day our event might be by tracking all of those passes and seeing what's at the highest elevation. And if it's within that week, that's a good chance they're going to select that because they want us to be as successful as possible. So I think we've narrowed it down to August 16th is when we're hoping they might select that pass, which might make it a little bit easier for people to join if they know ahead of time. But that's in no way confirmed.
The space station also has an ATRS repeater on it.
Yes. Yeah.
So that THD 72 you're talking about also runs ATRS. You can use ATRS to send packets through or messages through the space station.
Awesome. Any other questions or thoughts or ideas for things you want to see PacSci do with this?
Did you set up an internet listening stream?
Yes, absolutely. We will be live streaming. So all of the organizations selected, they do live stream. It could be set up by ARISS if that's not something that they have experience in, but because our theaters department is very experienced in that, we're going to be distributing it via our YouTube channel, as well as all of the schools that we do programming for via our digital learning team or digital discovery workshops. So they'll kind of zoom into classrooms and do workshops. So that team is helping us with that live stream to distribute it as far as possible. And we can send that out ahead of time. All right, I feel like we're good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.